Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Nikon booth here at CES 2019. We are here at the Nikon Theater. My name is Mike Corrado. I'm going to host here at the theater for the next 4 days. We have 44 programs. We have 10 panel discussions, lots of inspiration, lots of education, and lots of entertainment over the next 4 days. We're going to kick this off with an amazing fine art photographer named Stephen Wilkes. I've known Stephen for many years now, and to me, he's just got pure genius and creativity. And he's going to talk to you about a project he's been working on for many years called Day to Night. And in this case, maybe it's going to be night to day. Ladies and gentlemen, let's kick this off. 2019 CES Nikon Theater, Mr. Stephen Wilkes.
Thank you so much, Michael. Great. Thank you, everybody. Great to be here. This is a great honor to be the leadoff hitter here at 2019 at CES and be a part of Nikon, and so many great speakers that are going to be coming ahead, behind me here. So let me start by telling you that I'm going to share with you a body of work I've been spent the last 10 years creating called Day to Night. I'm going to take you through a bit of the process and the inspiration, more importantly. So Day to Night was really created. The inspiration came about when I was about 14 years old. I actually was able to go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art for the first time, and I was there. I saw a painting by a guy named Jan Bruegel, the Elder. It was called The Harvesters, and it actually changed my life because I walked up to this huge painting, and it was this epic landscape, and I could see all these little stories going on. In fact, there was so much information in the actual details of the people, what they were doing. You could almost feel the sweat on the brow of these workers in the field. There was a narrative story going on in this painting, and it really had a profound effect on me. Inspiration comes from different places, and I always say that there's an intersection where you see one thing and something else down the road comes, and suddenly that intersection gives you a really exciting idea. And that's what happened for me. In 1996, I was approached by Life magazine to photograph Baz Luhrmann's film Romeo and Juliet, and they wanted me to pay homage to the great big pictures. So there were hundreds of people in the cast and crew, and they said, go down, do a panoramic gatefold. And I got down there, the set was a square. And so at the time, I was trying to figure out how can I make a square into a panoramic, and David Hockney inspired me because he was doing these photo collages at the time. So I decided I would take 250 images, and literally I have Claire Danes and Leonardo in the center of the photograph embracing, but when I got to a frame of them reflecting in a mirror that was on the stage, I had them kiss just for that one frame. And I came back to New York and I put this 250 image thing together and looked at it and said, wow, this is so cool. I'm changing time in a photograph. And that concept stayed with me for 16 years until I had technology allowed my dreams really to become reality. So Day to Night is really a fusion between it's art and it's science. What I do to create these images, you start really with what I call a time vector. I decide where day begins and night ends. And that vector can either be on an x-axis or a y-axis or even diagonally on a z-axis. And I'm religious to where time changes and where people were based on time. So I start by shooting anywhere from 12 to 36 hours. This is how it exactly, the way it formulates in my mind. Einstein described time as a fabric that gets warped and bent based on gravitational fields. I see time as a fabric as well, except I flatten it into a two-dimensional piece of paper, a print or a photograph. So this is how it starts. I create what I call a master plate. This can take months to do. Based on my vector, I literally change the perspective. I literally create an image that is seamless based on time, day to night. I then edit for about a month, and I find the best moments based on exactly where they were in time. And those moments get seamlessly blended into one single photograph. I'm essentially bringing together these two very discordant worlds. This photograph took about 4 months to produce. just so you know, I'm working from a crane in this photograph. I'm about 50 feet in the air for 16 hours. And everything you see, there's single moments. There's no time lapse. There's nothing automated about what I do. This was the first one. I was assigned by New York Magazine to photograph the High Line, and I created this photograph. And you can see, as this is a very early one, I was completely enchanted by how spooky the High Line was at night, but at the same time, it was really cool during lunchtime. And I came up with the idea. That was the moment it happened. My second one I created was Washington Square Park, day to night, also on a commission for New York Magazine, a vertical. And I really started to explore New York and my love affair with New York. And so I started doing a whole series on the city. This is the Flatiron Building, day to night. On 9/11, the city of New York allowed me to bring a 170-foot crane into New York City on 9/11 on Fifth Avenue. And this is Times Square. I was actually underneath a billboard sign doing this photograph. So what you're going to see in my work, and I'll take you into it a little bit, this is the kind of detail you can expect when you see my prints in person. And one of the great joys about my work is I get to learn so much every time I spend that much time just looking at something. So what you're seeing here is day and night is actually checkerboarded because Times Square is actually a canyon. And so wherever there's sunlight is day and wherever it's shadow is night. One of the things that I learned was I always comment to people is that people say when they come to New York, oh, the energy of New York. Well, you know, at about 40 feet in the air, you get to feel and see the energy. What is New York? And New York and people and buses and cars actually are like schools of fish and flocks of birds. There's a form of emergent behavior that we actually participate in as well. This is one of my favorites. As I expanded the series, I wanted to capture, you know, fun, almost historic events. Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And one of the things about this photograph was I was shooting from the Lincoln Center building, and if you look, day starts on the left side of the frame, so the parade goes actually in reverse. And my favorite moment was being able to actually see people eating Thanksgiving dinner in their windows. So much of what I do is completely luck. I have no control, obviously, of the weather. If it's too windy, I can't take a night picture. I have no idea who shows up in my photographs, but I sense that sense of uneasiness is what drives me as a photographer. This is a photograph I did at Bethesda Fountain, and this was the beginning, really, of a series that happened for me of finding unique moments within a photograph. This time it was 5 brides, all Korean girls, and it turns out just by happenstance, I happened to be photographing on the good luck day in the Korean calendar, so that's why I have 5 brides. This is, of course, Central Park snow. Really magnificent snowstorm that I captured, and I was so lucky. I think I could shoot snow for 100 years and maybe never get one quite as perfect as this one. And here's the Brooklyn Bridge. Each one of these, as I've expanded the series, they seem to grow in complication and challenges. Brooklyn Bridge Park, this took actually 2 years to clear. And people always ask me, what was the most difficult part of this one? I think it was actually listening to the B&D train underneath the Manhattan Bridge for every 3 minutes. I can't imagine what that was like to your eardrums, but it's a special photograph. This, of course, is Rock Center, the Christmas tree. This photograph was actually done from Mr. Gimbel's private office in Saks Fifth Avenue. A lot of people don't know, but Gimbel's actually founded Saks. New Year's Eve, Times Square. And then I started to move the work into Europe. I was traveling around the world now doing these day to nights, looking for iconic locations. That's the really important aspect of this work. I'm exploring time and memory, and really the part of memory that's what I call part of our collective consciousness, you know, our collective memory. So I went to Amsterdam, and of course, you go to Amsterdam, you got to shoot the tulips. This was probably one of the most challenging ones I've ever done. It's in a place called Bergen, And if you're able to look closely at this photograph, you'll see, obviously, I have the windmill, but there are also bunkers that relate to the war, World War II, as the Dutch defended Bergen from this very location. This was one of the more fun ones. I spent 36 hours photographing Stonehenge. I'm on a scaffolding here, and basically, people are really not allowed anymore to go into Stonehenge. So the idea that you're going to get people inside of Stonehenge never happens, except one day a year. And that one day a year happened to be the day I was shooting. I had no idea. They allow a pagan wedding. So if you look closely in this photograph, there's a pagan wedding going on. They're all wearing these very gothic gowns and everything. It looked like something out of Dark Shadows. I could not believe what I was seeing. But it was just luck. Then I traveled to Italy, and I always wanted to photograph Venice using this technique because Venice is timeless. Here we are in San Marco Square. And this is called the Historical Regatta, which is an extraordinary event. These boats and costumes happened since 1496, exactly as they are now. So in a way, it was like going back in time for me. Again, the view from San Giorgio, spectacular, really an overview of what you get to see Venice looks like almost from the air. And then one of the most incredible experiences, I'd have to say, was photographing Easter Mass at the Vatican. This took almost 2.5 years to clear, and it's really one of my favorite shots. I call it my Where's Waldo to Pope Francis. Oh, let me go back. Try one of those. So Pope Francis actually appears 10 times in this photograph. One of the great joys I get when I do this work, I can actually capture the best moments of any specific day and night. This is the Paris-Tournai Bridge, day to night. And this is, of course, the Tour de France. And what's interesting about this photograph is if you look here, you can actually see time rotate on the Arc de Triomphe. This is the beginning of the race, and you see the women right now. And then as time changes, it's midday. That is the actual parade that goes on. And then the afternoon is the start of the men's race. The yellow jerseys right there. And then right here, that's the moment that the rider won the actual last leg of the Tour de France. So I actually have the whole race in one photograph. I went to India, and I've been fascinated by religious festivals. And I've spent 18 hours in a police tower photographing the Kumbh Mela festival in Haridwar. And this gives you an idea what the detail is like in this picture. That man leaning back is the moment they say he releases himself to God. Spectacular moment that I was able to capture, and it actually becomes essentially that single person the entire photograph comes through. Here's Varanasi. And here's one I did actually, and I saw a photograph. I'll tell you the story about this one. I saw this photograph online. I said, oh, what a guy did a great retouching job. He took the Guilin Mountains and put waterfalls on top of the Guilin Mountains. And then we back-checked it and found out it's actually a real place. It's called Di Chien, and it's on the border of Vietnam and China. And for me, it's Shangri-La. And you remember my thing with brides? There's actually a bride and groom in this picture, if you can believe that. And I didn't plant them there. This is Rio de Janeiro. Rio, sorry. And this is one of the most challenging ones I've ever done. Of course, this is the Palio in Siena, Italy. And this race only goes for 90 seconds at the end of the day, in the afternoon. And so what you're seeing here is, I'm going to just show you narratively, this is the sun rising. You see they have a walkthrough for the horses, and then they have a mass that goes on. Then the parade starts, the people fill in, and now the race starts. But this moment is actually a false start. This is the real start, the official start. And that's the moment that the Contrada wins the race. So this all happens 90 seconds. I spent 18 hours waiting for 90 seconds. And at the side here, you can actually see the Contrada going completely berserk. And if you think the World Cup is exciting, you got to see Palio, because I've never seen a motion like that anywhere. So this is the beginning now. National Geographic gave me, the society gave me a grant to photograph the national parks using this technique, to sort of capture them on their 100th anniversary in a unique way. So I photographed, this is called Tunnel View in Yosemite. Spent 36 hours photographing from a cliff. Much of my work is inspired by painting. Albert Bierstadt was a great inspiration in this particular photograph. I then photographed the Cherry Blossom Festival here in Washington, D.C. This is from a crane for 18 hours. This, of course, is Old Faithful. And if you look closely, let me go back. Time changes. This is like a clock face, and you can actually see time change along it. And this, of course, is the Grand Canyon. I shot this from the Desert Tower, and it's an amazing place. They let me sleep on top of the Desert Tower to create this photograph. Again, day, and then you'll actually see lightning, and then, of course, the left side of the photograph is completely lit by moonlight. So then my work segued into wildlife, and this is the moment that happened. I wanted to make a photograph about the Serengeti migration, the Great Migration. So I traveled to Tanzania and was hoping to find this massive migration, but strangely enough, it was a 5-week drought going on. So the animals were not in a normal migratory pattern, but they had to drink water. And I found a watering hole that I could work off of. And basically, after about 5 days of wrangling with the national park, they allowed me to go off park route area and set up basically a 15 to 20 foot scaffolding where I spent 26 hours in a crocodile blind. And so what you're going to see here is what that experience was like. So I spent 26 hours photographing nonstop. And what I witnessed was really nothing short of biblical. It was as if Noah had dropped the ark and they were going to load the animals in. I watched these competitive species share this resource that supposedly in the next 25 to 50 years we are all going to be having wars over, water. They seem to understand something that we humans don't, that water is this resource that is so precious and we all have to share. And this experience changed me in a very, very powerful way. I wanted to start now exploring using this new way of telling stories, this new way of photographing, telling narrative stories to focus on wildlife. And so my next picture, I gave a TED Talk in 2016, and a gentleman walked up to me and said, "Stephen, you got to come to where I work, Ropes and Bite." It's this reserve in British Columbia. It's off Vancouver Island where orca whales come and basically have a spa treatment. And they rub their bodies against rocks. It's the only place in the world this happens. And so what you're going to see here is my 36 hours of photographing. And I never slept here because it was too magnificent. And you're hearing the orcas. I actually had microphones that allowed me to hear the orcas from underwater mics. Now you've got cruise ships, you've got fishing vessels, you've got kayakers, you've got bald eagles, sea lions, everything. But yet, somehow it all works. So that brings me to my next series, which the Geographic gave me another grant for. I was able to photograph bird migration around the world. The first one I did was in a place called Steeplechase in the very south tip of Argentina, in the Falklands, and it's a remarkable place. This is what it was like to get there. You have to obviously fly to Chile and 2 other flights to this very small island called Carcass, and then about a 6-hour boat ride to get to this island. This is a place that very few people have ever been on. So WCS owns it, and they were so gracious to allow me to spend about 11 days there photographing. This is us approaching Steeplechase. And this will just give you a little bit of an idea of the challenges of what I do. So they had airlifted a 1970 Land Rover onto the island. Thank God it was still in working condition. And that was our mode of transportation. It's an 8-mile island. And finding these birds exactly, I didn't have a map or anything, so I really had to scout it. But this is the terrain we're going over. So when we found the spot where we thought this is the most birds, you have to hike through 8 feet tall tussock. And 8 cases. It's quite challenging. And here I am scouting. I've kind of liked this location. I'm getting kind of excited. And I've never seen anything quite like this. I can't express to you. Those little babies look very cute until they projectile vomit on you, and then it's not so cute. And it makes skunk oil look like a perfume. But this is where I was, 36 hours. And when people look at my work, they go, come on, that rainbow never happened. And my assistant filmed this with his iPhone. You're going to see. This is where we're shooting. And there's the rainbow. And it was just an amazing place to be. I would say if I ever had to come back as a bird, I want to be a black-browed albatross. That's where we were. This gives you some context. And this is what the photograph looked like. So one of the things about my work is yes, there's a science in terms of what I'm doing, but you get to actually see the behavior, the mating rituals, the way a mother teaches a baby how to fly. There's this deep, deep learning that I go through when I stare at a place for 36 hours. And I think that's what's so gratifying about the work for me, is that I'm learning in a time where we all are so connected to our cell phones that the act of looking is almost becoming a dying art form. I get to look at a single place for anywhere from 12 to 36 hours, and it changes you. This is Rose Sanctuary. Here I was photographing the sandhill cranes, and these cranes are extraordinary. First of all, I had to build about a 20-foot tower. The Audubon Society allowed me to do this. This is in the Platte River in Nebraska. And if somebody had told me that one of the most beautiful things you'll ever see is the sandhill crane migration, I'd say, really? In Nebraska? But it was. You can see the birds are sleeping in the evening light, and then now they take off during the day. You're talking about an 8-foot wingspan here. That's how big these birds are. And then it transitions into night. I spent 36 hours, again, inside this blind. I couldn't leave. No way. It was quite a challenging photograph. My next bird was a bird called the northern gannet. And so I went to a lovely little island called Bass Rock, which is, if you're a birder, it's considered nirvana. And to get there, you got to, fly, see a lot of castles on the way, and then you got to get into a boat. And that's the island out there. It's called Bass Rock. It's a volcanic island, has a lighthouse on it, and it's actually been owned by the same Scottish family for almost 200 years. When I say fully inhabited, you could see there is not a piece of grass left on this island. So it was more like the island of Dr. Moreau. It was quite challenging experience spending 36 hours. Great place to stay for maybe 2 or 3 hours, but not 36 hours. But anyway, I had to hike the 8 cases all the way up to the top. And it doesn't look challenging until you get here. And this is like skating on guano. That's how much of it was. And these birds are incredibly aggressive. As you get close to them, they like to stab you in this part of your calf muscle. That's their preferred choice. Here's my setup. I'm on what is a very destabilized volcanic rock, which literally every time I shifted my weight, it felt like my ankles were going to break. And this was my entertainment. The birds were feeding, and they basically are very aggressive when they nest. And so male on male, female on female are always sort of fighting with each other as soon as one gets too close territorially. But of all the places I've been, I've never quite had an experience like this. Guano, after 36 hours, you can see my hard hat. That served a dual purpose to protect me from birds that actually dropped out of the sky, because when northern gannets fall, when the wind dies and they don't have any lift, they drop, literally drop like rocks. But it was worth it for this picture. So you can see the moon rising, or excuse me, the moon setting in this photograph. And then you see the morning light, and it rotates all the way into the afternoon, and finally you'll see the sun setting over the ridge. So each one of these presented its own challenges. Obviously, birds that are nesting are much easier for me to do because they don't leave. They have children. They don't want to leave. The next one I did, which was really challenging, was Lake Bogoria. And that was for the lesser flamingo. And I was supposed to do this photograph actually in a place called Rio Largatos in the Yucatan. But for the first time ever, Rio Largatos this last year did not have any birds nesting. So they just didn't show up. So as a result, we had to punt, and we found that there was a huge population in Lake Bogoria, Africa. Now, this is a very saline lake. It's rich with nutrients. But one of the things about it is that these birds love to wash in fresh water. And climate change actually helped me here because, as you could see, you see how green the hills look? This is in the dead of winter. So this is not supposed to be green. They'd been getting thunderstorms every night at 9:30 at night. And the fresh water would come down from the mountains and created this perfect freshwater stream for me. And so I decided to build this 30-foot tower right next to the fresh water in the hope that maybe the birds would ignore me and want to bathe. And that's exactly what happened. So this is me doing my work, 36 hours we do this. People think it's automated. There's nothing automated about what I do. I literally look at a place that long. I study it that long. And this is the picture. And you can see one of the things about lesser flamingos, this, by the way, is one moment. Lesser flamingos are hunted by a bird called the marabou stork, and you're going to see them in the front of this photograph. And they are literally militaristic in the way they hunt. So they worked for me in the sense that they kept terrorizing the birds every hour and a half, and that allowed me to layer in seamlessly. This is on, again, the y-axis, so day starts at the bottom, night at the top. But right in the afternoon, they had a full-on attack from the front and the back. And so everything you see here, that is actually one moment. That's 100,000 birds flying at once. And one of the great challenges, I think, is when you do these pictures, people say, well, what was the challenge in making this photograph? And I would have thought right away was making sure I got the birds. But actually, the challenge here was making sure that people, tourists, there's this terrible problem in Lake Bogoria where foreign tourists come in and they throw rocks just to get good photographs. You know, they scream at the birds, they terrorize the birds, and I think it's really important you guys see something here. This is what a marabou stork attack looks like. It's a completely different effect when somebody throws a rock. So if you're patient and you wait, you can make the photograph. And this is the one I did for Nikon. I was fortunate enough, Nikon commissioned me to create a day-to-night of grizzly bears, and I shot this in Bella Coola using the new Z7 camera. This is what the experience was like. So Bella Coola is in the far northern region of British Columbia. It's an extraordinary place with amazing wildlife, one of the largest populations of bears, grizzly bears. We built this. There we are shooting, and there are the bears. And one of the things that happened on this, I'm working with my assistant Lenny, who you'll see here. He's going to be in the picture momentarily. And when we do these photographs, about 18 hours, you kind of get a little numb in the head, you'd imagine. And Lenny looks at me and he goes, hey, look what I got. I got a Ricola. You want one? And I go, yeah, sure. And so we both are sucking on a Ricola. I have Lenny working in the background. He's starting to put the image together. I'm waiting for maybe another bear to come. And all of a sudden I turn around and there is this monster grizzly bear about 8 feet away from us. You're going to see in the video, we have a time lapse. You can see how close he actually comes to us. We had a soul here. It's going to come up now very shortly. We had a solar-powered electric fence. Here we are. And I was just busy around. I was shooting some other things, and there he is. He walks right by us, and he ended up being in the photograph. They have a very acute sense of smell, so if you want to see a grizzly, suck on a honey eucalyptus ricola. They'll come for you. And this is what the picture looks like. So now I want to show one last thing. This is a new documentary I've just done. I've created on my mentor, a guy named Jay Maisel, and thankful for the generous support that Nikon has given me to actually finish this film. So I'd like to share with you the trailer.
I think there's a delight in the perception and the enjoyment of objects. Objects are there only if you really see them. If you don't, they don't exist. And art is, to some effect, trying to make others see what you see.
For 35 years, Jay Maisel has been showing us his extraordinary vision of the world.
He was someone that we all looked up to. He was an idol.
Jay's images invariably seem to say, stop and look at this.
It was the summer of 1979. I took an internship with a photographer named Jay Maisel. Jay's home and his studio was a 6-story, 36,000 square foot former bank on Spring Street in the Bowery. When I heard that this building had changed my life and the man who shaped it were moving on, I immediately knew I had to capture Jay's world before it disappeared. Each floor represented a certain partition of his mind.
He had more junk than I did. Everything that was there was useless.
They're estimating 35 truckloads to get out of here.
He sees all these potential in things that no one else would think of. He just has such a sense of play.
What I'm trying to do all the time is to try and see things anew. To see things the way a child would see them. It's like, here comes the world, and I'm trying to get it as it comes towards me. I wanted a place that I would have roots. And this was this building. I had always planned to die here, but I can't. I'm trying to look at it as an adventure.
He was an artist of his generation, a philosopher, and the greatest teacher I ever had.
We do not take pictures. We're taken by pictures.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Stephen Wilkes.